What's up, brothers and sisters? It's your brother G World 7_D. Right here, I have myths and symbols in pagan Europe, early Scandinavian and Celtic religions. All right, and I'm going to turn the page and look at this. I talked about this earlier. This is a wooden Negro figure from Denmark. All right, I'm going to go earlier. That's what I talked about earlier, but I'm going to read you this. All right. Get it clear. Mounds and standing stones. There were more abstract monuments set up at times in sacred places. The great burial mounds of kings were themselves important symbols and a possible means of communication with the other world. Those of Upper Uppsala in Sweden consist of 3 huge mounds, with a large number of lesser ones clustered around them. And these were raised over cremation burials of the migration period preceding the Viking Age. Some Swedish mounds have flattened tops with a slight slope, suggesting a stage on which action will be visible to those standing below. According to a Norse literary tradition, the burial mound was a place on which kings and sirs might sit in order to obtain wisdom and inspiration. The mound also served as a center from which the king could make announcements to the people, from which new laws could be proclaimed, and on which a new ruler could be installed. An example of this is Tyenwald Hill on the Isles of Man, where the Manic Parliament still assembles at midsummer. It is a step mound with a place on top for reigning monarch, usually represented by the lieutenant general, accompanied by the bishops and demonsters, while the 3 lower tiers are for members of the House of Keys, representatives of local authorities, ministers of the churches, and so forth. The mound was raised by Norse settlers who arrived in the 9th century, and it is an artificial hill set up on the site of an earlier burial mound of the Bronze Age. In Irish tradition, also mounds form part of an assembly place, and in the tales there are instances of visions or strange adventures befalling those who sit on the mounds near the courts of kings. There was a close link between man and the supernatural world by way of the burial mound, since it was into such mounds that the gods of pre-Christian Ireland, the 2 Atha de Danann, were said to retreat after the coming of Christianity. The dwelling of the Dagda was a new Grange, a great prehistoric burial mound near the river Boyne. At the festival of Samhain on the 1st of November, the beginning of winter, it was believed that the other way to the other world lay open, and there are many tales of living men entering the mounds or of visits by the dead to the living on that night. The stone figure of the Hirslanden stood upon the burial mound, and in Scandinavia carved stones were sometimes placed on them. Flat, rounded stones, difficult to date with any accuracy, survived in Sweden. And one of these from Engling How near Vagel, sorry for the pronunciation, is elaborately decorated. This formerly stood on Tumulus, and was known as the King of Varind throne. It is not known whether such stones were intended for seats or whether they were rolled down the mound on some ritual occasion, as wheels was rolled down hills at midsummer. Another type of decorated stone associated with holy places is the domed or pyramid-shaped stone, of which an outstanding example is outside the Truro House, County Meath, in Ireland. This was brought from its original position on the north side of the circular raft or earthwork dating back to the 1st century BC, and may have been set up as early as this. It is decorated with asymmetrical carving patterns in the La Tini style, and other examples, less well preserved, have been found in Ireland. It has been claimed that these show a complex division to 4 parts, comparable to patterns on an earlier stone from Carmara, Finsterine, of roughly pyramid shape. The Turo stone bears a striking resemblance to the Omphalos at the shrine of Apollo at Delphi, and those northern stones may have served a similar purpose, symbolizing the navel or center of the earth at the Uisnex, a sacred place roughly in the center of Ireland where the Druids were said to meet. There was a stone known as the Stone of Division. Each, according to Geraldus Cambrensis, was a navel of Ireland, as it were, placed right in the middle of the land. Uisnex, as well as Tara, could be regarded as a traditional center, and the two are described in one Middle Irish source as being like 2 kidneys in one animal. Yet another famous stone was File, called the Laia File, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, sorry about that, or the Stone of Knowledge, which was on the hill of Tara. This is called a stone penis, and is usually assumed to be the pillar with the rounded top, which is still on the hill. Although Keating thought that the original stone had been taken to Scotland, the tradition preserved in the 12th century literature was that this was the stone of inauguration, which roared under the feet of the man destined to be king, or, in the earlier account, gave a screech when the king drove past it in his chariot, while 2 flagstones opened to allow the king to pass between them. And there were 2 flagstones in Tara, Block and Blugin. When they accepted a man, they would open before him under the chariot went through. And Fowl was there, the stone penis at the head of the chariot course, when a man should have the kingship of Tara. It screeched against his chariot axle so that all might hear. Well, there appears to be some confusion in tradition between a standing stone and a flagstone which the new king stood. It is clear that the ancient stones formed an important part of the holy place, and that they were associated with the choice and recognition of a king. The stone from Scone, taken by Edward I from Scotland to Westminster Abbey, is another example, and there are others from various tribal centers. Similar stones existed also in Scandinavia. A Danish chronicler refers to the Dangrang near Viborg, used by men of Jutland when they proclaimed a new king, while Olaus Magnus mentioned the Moresten near Uppsala, said to be a huge and rounded stone on which Swedes raised their chosen rulers. The association of the holy place with the choosing of a king is in accordance with the importance of Thingvellir in Iceland as the site of the main assembly where the law was proclaimed. Although there was no king to be inaugurated there, men from the 4 quarters met at Thingvellir, and there was a plain of the places they were entitled to occupy in front of the Law Rock. Thingvellir was not the geographical center of the island, for a true center would be in the lava desert, but it was a symbolic one, with roads leading to it from every direction. Like Thingvellir, Tara in Ireland, superbly situated with wide views on every side of their central plains. It is a feature of the hill of Tara. O'Riordan wrote in his description of the site, which never fails to impress. One medieval poem described Tara as the center square of a gaming board. Tara Castle, delightful hill, are out of the exact center of the plain. However, it is far from being the true center of Ireland. And once more, what we have a symbolic center, surrounded by 4 kingdoms of Ulster, Connacht, Leinster, and Munster. Plains for seating of the Hall of Terror are given in 2 manuscripts, the 12th century Book of Leinster and the 15th century Yellow Book of Lecan. Late through these they preserve memories of careful plan, and it seems possible that the whole country was reproduced in the layout of Central Hall, with four provincial halls range around. The pattern of four divisions around its central point is found in both Iceland, Ireland, and Mueller claims that this is a fundamental pattern in both Germanic and Celtic tradition. Another center was placed where the Druids met in Gaul, described as the center of all Gauls by Julius Caesar, but in fact somewhere near Chartres. Here, as at Thingvellir, disputes from the region around were said to have been brought for settlement. I'm going to stop right there reading that. It talks about the mound building over there in Europe, and mound building was known by the Aboriginal blacks here in America, but they built mounds all over the planet, monumental structures. This is one we should call the Holy Hill. All right, they build mounds and structures globally, brothers and sisters, or carved into rock globally. This is what you say, large phallus. All right, and this was done globally. Now, also going back to this book, because I gave it 4 burial mounds in Europe and Japan. Now, this talks about burial mounds. I just read some in Europe, particularly Northern Europe, and this talks about burial mounds in Japan. You had burial mounds here in the Americas, and I told you mounds were just one burying so-called leaders. It also, they were used for other purposes. Now, this is the book I had before, burial mounds in Europe and Japan. And you know you had the burial mounds in America, but I want to show you this image here from Scandinavia, from Denmark. And here you go right here. This is an image from Denmark. Now, remember I showed you that picture of Olmec before? Let me get a clear picture. Look at this Negro with an afro, man. Look at the freaking hairline. This is obvious, man. And then look, he's in a sitting position. He has some kind of box or figure in between his hands. And then he has these little neck rings around his neck. You see them Negroes that you seen in the Americas. You seen them in Africa. Had these little neck rings around their damn neck, man. And obviously you can tell this. I said, look at this hairline. Look at this mid-sized fro, man. This is a wooden figure from Denmark. I had mentioned this before earlier. The original so-called Vikings were black. When I mentioned castles, they had those black nobilities building castles over in Europe, and you had Negroes building castles here in America. Negroes were building mounds. You know about the mounds here in America and the pyramidal structures. They built pyramids, will build mounds all over here in America. They built some in Europe and Japan, as well as pyramids you see in China, you see in Egypt, you see in America, and other pyramidal structures you may find in India. Negroes was doing that all over the planet. And I emphasize this because we constantly hear our people talking about being slaves in Africa. That information is wrong. It's out of this book, Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe, Early Scandinavian and Celtic Religions. It mentions a little bit about the Celtic Iberians. I may talk about it. Those are Negroes. So I'm telling you, your history goes beyond slavery. But we've been given a false narrative of who we are. We got to stop that. We got to understand our true history and our true well-being. Like I said, I'm going to go back to this book right here. I was talking about burial mounds in that book. Here are the burial mounds in Europe and Japan. And I mentioned before in this book about they're building mounds, monumental structures all over the planet. And if I can find this one image, you know, right now I can't find an image or image of the mounds up in this book, but this book talks about that. This is over in Europe. All right, it talks about how some of the mounds are built and how they were constructed. You know, but this is from this book. Well, if I get an image, one second, if I can get an image on this book. Okay, well, this is one. I see one in Chile right here that I have in the book. This might be in Ireland. I think this one in Ireland. So these structures are built all over the planet. All right. Mounds and pyramidal structures were built all over the planet. They weren't just in so-called in Americas, and we as a people weren't just landlocked in West Africa. That is misinformation and bad information. This is why it's important to really do your deep research, because your history is all over the planet. Here's a little drawn illustration of a mound in Sweden. An artist's rendition. You know, so I've said this before over and over again. You have mounds, Germany, mounds of Dougie, but you have mounds all over the planet. All right, we build mounds all over the planet, and that's how you can connect our history globally. Because it wasn't just the mound building here in Americas; you had those mounds globally, and pyramids globally. So that knowledge was being taken around the planet. So how they get around the planet? They sailed the seas. We had the knowledge to sail the sea. We didn't need a white man to give us a Gilligan Island ship on a 3-hour tour. We did that ourselves. We traveled and sailed the seas and built and charted the damn planet. You have to understand that. Some of us don't want to understand that. We just want to say we're ADOS or some West African slaves, which is a lie. We're the Aboriginal black people that are already here, descended there, as well as mixed with black Europeans. Like I've always said, here's another European mound. They're all over the planet, all over the world. So we got to really take back our full history. This book is more of a technical book, so you may not want to get in it. I mean, it may be hard for you to get into it, but this book is more of a technical book. This is more of a technical book, but this is a good book. And these are different structures that was also found over there. All right, but this is a good book to read. Also, too, and I've talked about this one before, burial mounds in Europe and Japan. I may talk about the even more in depth. Like I said, one of my presentations I talked about it, but I may talk about it more in depth. The book I just read out was his Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe, Early Scandinavian and Celtic Gods. So see, look at this guy, look at this afro, man. And I can go to page, where's the page that I really had it? You see even more clear right here. A little afro, man. The miniature afro, and then like the neck rings around him, man. These are obviously some damn Negroes. The original Vikings were Negroes. Peace and love.